The thing about pain is that it teaches you exactly who you are. And right now, as the fourth blow connected with her ribs, Mara Chen was learning she had far more patience than she'd ever given herself credit for. "I said stop," she repeated quietly, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. The Calraxian enforcer, a hulking creature named Vok, laughed. It was a wet, gurgling sound that echoed through the cargo bay. His three companions joined in, their mandibles clicking in what passed for amusement among their species. "The human speaks," Vok hissed, his translator rendering his words in mocking tones. "Look, brothers, it thinks words have power here." Mara stayed on her knees, hands zip-tied behind her back, and counted. 1, 2, 3, for seconds of laughter. She committed the sound to memory, filed it away in a special place she'd been building since she was 7 years old and Tommy Brestwick had pushed her off the monkey bars. Tommy had learned to walk again after 6 months of physical therapy. These four wouldn't be so lucky. "You know what's funny?" Mara asked, spitting blood onto the deck plating. "I actually came here to negotiate. Can you believe that? Me, negotiating." The smallest of the group, a wiry Calraxian called Pesh, moved closer. "Your Federation thinks it can dictate terms to us. Thinks it can waltz into Fringe Station 7 and demand we cease operations." He kicked her in the stomach. Mara grunted, doubling over. 5. That was 5. "We've been running the station for 12 cycles. Another enforcer, Drax, added. He was missing half his face from some previous altercation, the scarred tissue gleaming under the harsh lights. Your kind shows up, waving papers, talking about violations and sanctions." He struck her across the face with the back of his claw. 6. "Stop," Mara said again, quieter this time, almost a whisper. Vok leaned down, his breath reeking of sulfur and rotted meat. "Or what, little human? You'll file a complaint? Send a strongly worded message?" He grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. "You're in our territory now. There are no rules here except the ones we make." "Actually," Mara coughed, tasting copper, "I was going to give you one last chance to let me go. Professional courtesy and all that." The laughter this time was even louder. The fourth Calraxian, Thresh, slammed his fist into her kidney. 7. "She's got spirit. I'll give her that." Thresh chuckled. "Most humans start crying by now. Begging. Offering bribes. This one's different," Pesh observed, circling her like a predator. "I've seen her type before. Military, probably. Think she's tough." "I was a kindergarten teacher," Mara corrected, her voice strained. "Before I joined the Diplomatic Corps, I taught 5-year-olds how to share crayons and not eat paste." Vok struck her again. 8. "Why do they keep sending you?" he demanded. "Year after year, delegate after delegate. We break them, we send the pieces back, and still they come. Are humans really this stupid?" Mara smiled through broken teeth. "We prefer the term persistent." Drax hit her. 9. "Here's what's going to happen," Vok announced, addressing his crew. "We're going to make an example of this one. Something memorable. Then we'll broadcast it to every Federation ship in range. Let them see what happens when they ignore our warnings." "Sounds like a plan," Pesh agreed, pulling out a wicked-looking blade. "Should we start with the fingers or the eyes?" "I'm partial to fingers," Thresh offered. "More screaming that way." "Gentlemen," Mara interjected, "I really must insist that you stop. This is your final warning." The blow from Vok was the hardest yet. It sent her sprawling onto her side, stars exploding across her vision. 10. "Final warning," he mocked. "What are you going to do, human? Bleed on us aggressively?" Mara lay there for a moment, breathing carefully. She'd cracked a rib with that last one. Possibly two. Her jaw was definitely broken, and she was pretty sure she'd lost a tooth. Standard interrogation injuries. Nothing she hadn't experienced in training. But training was controlled, supervised. This was different. This was permission. "Okay," she said quietly, working her wrists against the zip ties. The Calraxians had made a critical error. They'd assumed human anatomy was similar to theirs, that the width of her wrists was proportional to her hands. They were wrong. Okay, you had your chance. What was that? Pesh leaned in. Speak up, human. The zip tie snapped. Humans had evolved a remarkable range of motion in their shoulder joints, a leftover adaptation from their tree-dwelling ancestors. Mara brought her hands around front, still bound together but functional. I said, she rose smoothly to her feet, ignoring the screaming protest from her ribs, you should have stopped when I asked nicely. The Calraxian stared at her for a heartbeat. Then Vok lunged. Humans were pursuit predators. Their ancestors had chased prey across African savannas for hours, days even, until the target collapsed from exhaustion. They'd evolved to be efficient, to conserve energy, to move with a grace that belied their endurance. Mara wasn't built like a soldier. She was 5'6", 140 pounds, soaking wet, but she'd grown up on Earth, where the gravity was 1.3 times standard, where the oxygen levels made other species lightheaded, where every day was a workout just existing. She sidestepped Vok's charge with insulting ease, bringing her bound fist down on the back of his skull as he passed. The impact would have killed a human. Calraxians had thicker bones, denser tissue. But Mara had been holding back for 10 hits. She wasn't holding back anymore. Vok went down hard, skidding across the deck. Before his companions could react, Mara was moving. Pesh reached for his weapon. Mara's foot connected with his wrist, shattering the joint with an audible crack. The blade clattered away. You see, she said conversationally, ducking under Drax's wild swing, the thing about humans is we have this concept called proportional response. She drove her elbow into his solar plexus, following up Anita's face as he doubled over. You hit us once, we'll probably let it slide. Twice, we'll file a complaint. Another knee, this time to the temple. Drax collapsed. But 10 times? Thresh was backing away now, his earlier confidence evaporating. You're insane. I'm a deathworlder, Mara corrected, advancing on him. There's a difference. See where you come from. Violence is a tool, a means to an end. You use it to establish dominance, to control, to frighten. She feinted left. Thresh fell for it, exposing his right side. Her fist sank into his ribs with satisfying force. But humans, we evolved on a planet that actively tried to kill us. Every single day. Thresh swung wildly. Mara caught his arm, twisted, and felt the elbow joint dislocate. His scream was beautiful. Predators that could gut us with a single swipe, whether that could freeze or roast us in hours. Diseases that killed millions before we learned to fight back. She swept his legs, sending him crashing down. We didn't just survive. We thrived. We conquered. We looked at a world designed to destroy us, and we said no. Her foot came down on his knee. The joint bent backward with a wet crunch. So when you hit me 10 times and I asked you to stop, she leaned down, her voice dropping to a whisper. You really should listen. Vok had recovered, his movements sluggish. He charged again, roaring something in his native tongue that the translator couldn't parse. Probably profanity. Mara waited until the last possible second, then dropped low. Vok's momentum carried him over her, and she helped him along with an upward thrust that sent him sailing into a cargo container. The impact left a dent. I try to be diplomatic, she said, walking over to where Pesh was cradling his broken wrist. I really did. Came here with proposals, compromised positions, even some concessions that made my superiors uncomfortable. She grabbed him by his chin and his collar, lifting him effortlessly in the lower gravity. But you know what I learned teaching kindergarten? Pesh whimpered. Some people only understand consequences. She threw him across the bay. He hit the wall and slid down, unconscious before he reached the floor. The entire fight had taken 90 seconds. Mara stood in the center of the cargo bay, breathing hard, her vision swimming slightly from a concussion she definitely sustained. For Calraxian enforcers lay broken around her, groaning or unconscious. She found Pesh's blade, used it to cut the remains of the zip tie from her wrists. Then she walked to the bay's communication panel and keyed in a specific frequency. This is Diplomatic Envoy Mara Chen to Federation Ship Tenacity, she said calmly. Please inform Captain Rhodes that negotiations have concluded. The station is ready for boarding and enforcement action. Send medical for 4 injured Calraxians. Non-critical but urgent. She paused. Also, request medical for me. Suspected broken jaw, fractured ribs, possible concussion. I'm mobile but would appreciate an escort. The response came immediately. Confirmed, Envoy Chen. Medical teams are en route. Are you secure? Mara looked around the bay at the carnage she created. Secure and waiting. Understood. Captain Rhodes says to tell you well done. Thank him for me, Mara replied. And tell him I want hazard pay for this one. They really should have stopped when I asked nicely. She sat down carefully on a cargo container, every movement sending fresh waves of pain through her battered body. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by the familiar ache of combat injuries. Worth it, though. 20 minutes ago, for enforcers had been standing, confident in their power, secure in their control of this little corner of space. Now none of them were standing, and word would spread. It always did. The medical team found her sitting exactly where she'd been when she called in, surrounded by groaning Calraxians and looking far too calm for someone who just dismantled 4 professional enforcers with her bare hands. Ma'am, the lead medic, a young Terran named Davies, approached cautiously. We need to get you to the infirmary. In a minute, Mara said, watching as Federation security personnel began securing the station. I want to make sure they understand the message first. Captain Rhodes entered the bay, his boots echoing on the deck plating. He was a career military man, scarred and serious, with the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile sometime around the Battle of Proxima. He looked at the scene, then at Mara, then back at the scene. Envoy Chen, he said slowly, I'm going to need a full report. Self-defense. Mara replied simply. They initiated contact. I asked them to stop. They declined. Multiple times. Rhodes walked over to Vok, who was conscious but clearly wishing he wasn't. How many times did she ask? Vok groaned something unintelligible. 10 hits. Mara supplied helpfully. I counted. After the 10th one, I considered the diplomatic phase concluded. Diplomatic phase, Rhodes repeated, the ghost of amusement flickering across his face. That's what we're calling it? I'm a diplomat, Captain. Everything I do is diplomatic, until I file the paperwork saying otherwise. Mara winced as Davies began examining her injuries. Ow! Careful with the ribs. You've got at least 2 fractures, possibly 3, Davies muttered, running a scanner over her torso. Broken jaw, severe contusions, mild concussion. Ma'am, you should be in shock right now. I've had worse, Mara said dismissively. Remember the incident on Tarsus 5? That insurgent who thought kneecapping me would make me more agreeable. I read the report, Rhodes said. You negotiated the entire treaty while in surgery. Anesthesia makes me chatty. She turned her attention to the cargo bay's main entrance, where station personnel were being rounded up. How many more? Station manifest shows 47 Calraxians total. Most are scrambling to surrender now that word's gotten out about what happened here. Rhodes crouched down to her eye level. Chun, what were you thinking? You were supposed to wait for backup. I was thinking that if I waited, they'd have time to destroy evidence. Execute hostages. Standard procedure for criminals who know they're cornered. She met his gaze steadily. Better to let them think they had the upper hand. Let them get comfortable, confident. Let them beat the hell out of you, you mean? That too. Mara allowed Davies to inject her with something that made the pain recede to a dull roar. Pain is temporary, Captain. Justice is forever. Or at least until the next parole hearing. A commotion at the entrance drew their attention. A smaller Calraxian, this one wearing what looked like administrative robes, was being escorted in by 2 very large security officers. Her scales were a lighter shade of green, indicating youth, and her eyes were wide with fear. That's Sixa, Mara said quietly. Station administrator's assistant. She's the one who sent the distress signal. Rhodes raised an eyebrow. The intel that brought you here came from inside the organization? Not everyone who works for criminals is a criminal themselves. Mara pushed herself upright, ignoring Davies' protest. Some people are just trying to survive. She walked over to Sixa, each step carefully measured. The young Calraxian flinched as she approached. "It's okay," Mara said gently, switching to Calraxian Standard. Her translator flickered, but held. "You did the right thing." "They'll kill me," Sixa whispered. "When they find out I contacted the Federation, they'll kill my family." "No," Mara said firmly. "They won't, because in about 6 hours, every enforcer on this station will be in Federation custody. The trafficking operation will be shut down. The slaves will be freed." She placed a hand on Six's shoulder. "And you're going to help us make sure we don't miss anyone." "I can't," Six's voice broke. "You don't understand what they're capable of." Mara gestured around the cargo bay. "Look at what I'm capable of. And I'm just one human who's really good at asking nicely before I stop asking." She smiled, though it hurt her broken jaw. "Now imagine an entire ship full of people like me, all very motivated to end this operation. Who do you think wins that fight?" Sixa looked at the fallen enforcers, then back at Mara. "They said humans were weak, soft, good for labor, but nothing else. They said that right before I broke them," Mara pointed out. "So maybe their intelligence was slightly flawed." A laugh escaped Sixa, surprised and slightly hysterical. "Slightly." "Come on," Mara said, guiding her toward Captain Rhodes. "Let's go save some lives. I'll even let the captain do the fun part, where he reads them their rights. He loves that." Rhodes didn't love it, but he was professional enough not to complain as Mara briefed him on the station layout, using information Sixa provided. The trafficking operation was extensive, worse than initial intelligence had suggested. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species, all destined for labor camps or worse. "We'll need to coordinate with the Galactic Council on this one," Rhodes said, studying the data. "Some of these victims are from protected worlds." "The Council takes forever," Mara objected, leaning heavily against a bulkhead. The painkillers were wearing off. By the time they convened a committee to discuss forming a subcommittee to investigate potential action, half these people will be dead. Protocol exists for a reason, Envoy. So does expedited emergency action under Article 7 of the Federation Charter. Mara fixed him with a look that had made admirals reconsider their positions. "I'm invoking it. Captain, you are hereby authorized to take any and all necessary measures to secure the safety of sentient beings currently held against their will on this station. Congratulations, you just got a blank check." Rhodes stared at her. "You can't just invoke Article 7. That requires approval from command. I'm a level 5 diplomatic envoy with emergency powers." Mara pulled out her credentials, the holographic seal flickering above her palm. "In situations involving imminent threat to protected sentience, I can authorize military action without prior approval. It's in the fine print. Page 47, subsection 12, paragraph C. You memorize emergency protocols?" "I memorize everything, Captain. It's why they send me to places like this." She swayed slightly, and Davies caught her elbow. "Also, why I don't die when people hit me 10 times. Turns out knowing exactly how many times you've been assaulted helps with the legal paperwork later." "Infirmary," Davies insisted. "Now, before you collapse and make my job harder." "In a minute," Mara said, but there was less conviction in her voice. The adrenaline crash was hitting hard, and the room was starting to tilt in interesting ways. "Just need to make sure." "I've got this," Rhodes said, his tone softer. "You did your job. Chun, let me do mine. The hostages in Section 7 need medical attention first." Mara continued stubbornly. "They've been without food for 3 days. And the children in Section 9, make sure they're separated from the adults. They'll be traumatized. And somebody needs to check the environmental controls in Section 4, because there's a methane breather in there, and if the mix is wrong..." "Chun." Rhodes gripped her shoulder. "I've got this." "That's an order." Mara blinked at him. "You can't order me. I'm a civilian." "Then it's a very strong suggestion from someone who'd rather not explain, to command why I let their best negotiator die of stubbornness." "I don't die easy," Mara mumbled, but she let Davies guide her toward the exit. Deathworlder, remember? Takes more than a broken face to stop me. Ma'am, Davies said patiently, you're about 30 seconds from passing out. Please work with me here. Fine, Mara insisted, even as her legs decided they'd had enough of this whole standing thing. Davies caught her before she hit the deck. Right? He sighed, signaling for a stretcher. Definitely fine. That's why you're horizontal. The last thing Mara saw before the painkillers finally won was Sixa, watching her with something like awe, and Captain Rhodes barking orders that would dismantle a criminal empire before the end of the shift. Not a bad day's work, all things considered. 3 weeks later, Mara sat in the office of Admiral Keiko Tanaka, her jaw wired shut and her ribs still tender, listening to a lecture about proper diplomatic protocol. You could have been killed, Tanaka said, not for the first time. Mara wrote on her datapad. But I wasn't. You engaged 4 armed hostiles without backup. They engaged me. I responded proportionally. Proportionally, Tanaka repeated flatly. You put all 4 in intensive care. They hit me 10 times. I stopped them from hitting anyone ever again. Math checks out. Tanaka rubbed her temples. The Calraxian government is filing a formal complaint. Let them, Mara typed. We freed 214 slaves from that station. Shut down a trafficking network that spanned 6 systems. Arrested 47 criminals. And we did it without firing a single shot. She paused and added, well, I didn't fire any shots. Can't speak for the cleanup crew. The point, Tanaka said, is that you took unnecessary risks. Mara's fingers flew across the datapad. With respect, Admiral, the only unnecessary thing was how long those people suffered before we acted. Sometimes diplomacy means talking. Sometimes it means listening. And sometimes it means showing bullies exactly what happens when they ignore the word stop. Tanaka was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed. The council wants to give you a commendation. I'd rather have hazard pay. You're getting both. Also a mandatory 2-week medical leave. Can I negotiate that down to 1 week? No. 3 days. Chun. Fine, Mara typed sulkily. But I'm filing this under duress. File it wherever you want. Tanaka's expression softened slightly. You did good work out there. Reckless, insane, probably violating 6 different regulations, but good. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me, Admiral. Don't let it go to your head. You're still a pain in my ass. Mara grinned, which hurt her jaw, so she stopped. Wouldn't have it any other way. As she left Tanaka's office, datapad tucked under her arm, Mara pulled up the latest reports from Fringe Station 7. The former slaves were being processed through rehabilitation centers. The Calraxian criminals were awaiting trial. 6 had been granted asylum and was helping identify other trafficking operations. And somewhere out in the black, word was spreading about the human diplomat who'd asked them to stop. About what happened when they didn't listen. Mara Chen smiled despite the pain. Let them talk. Let them spread the word. Because next time someone decided to test humanity's patience, they'd remember the woman who counted 10 and then stopped counting. They'd remember that when a human says stop, you really, really should listen. And if you don't, well, 20 minutes later, none of them would be standing.